What does it take to strike it big in the Bering Sea? Not just guts, but gears. Lots of gear and one massive rebuild. Shawn didn't just want to compete this season, he wanted to dominate. And to do that he didn't dip a toe and he dove head first, pouring nearly every dollar he could scrape together into a mechanical gamble rebuilding the Myrtle Iron from the steel up. You're probably wondering what the price tag is. It's $800,000, and the stakes are even higher. The Myrtle wasn't just an old boat, it was a legend for all the wrong reasons, clunky, leaky, nearly forgotten. Until now, night fell like a curtain over the Bering Sea, but on the Myrtle Iron, lights glared and diesel engines growled. This wasn't some test run, this was it. Everything Shawn had done, the long nights, the sketchy deals, the money that didn't exist but somehow got spent, came down to this moment. The rebuilt dredge looked like a beast-lowered wash plant. Reinforced pumps, a second soul box. Double-checked to catch even the fine gold dust that used to slip through unnoticed. This wasn't about showing off. This was about survival. I took a big gamble that I could rebuild this in a matter of weeks. The longer it takes, the less time I have to make my money back on the water this year. But so far my crew is killing it as the Myrtle Iron crept slowly over an old underwater hot spot. Anticipation hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just any location, it was a stretch of seafloor that had been picked over by other miners, scraped and sampled, yet never fully broken open. Most had given up, convinced there was nothing left, but Shawn had a different hunch. He believed the real gold was buried deeper, much deeper. With its new upgrades, the Myrtle was ready to go where others couldn't. The bucket dropped into the black water and descended nearly 30 feet below the surface, reaching depths that no other rig could manage. Moments later, the machine groaned as it surfaced with its first payload, thick, heavy cobble. It wasn't gold, but it was something close beneath. Cobbles like that, there's usually more, something worth chasing. And then it happened. The next few scoops pulled up a different kind of dirt, entirely clay. It was like a sediment formed slowly over centuries, layer by layer, dense with the promise of gold. With every pass, the rebuilt dredge tore through the gold-holding clay like it was nothing more than putting time ticked by, but there was no slowing down. The crew didn't celebrate, they didn't pop champagne. They just dug. Shawn, he pace-checked valves, monitored hoses. Every hiss of steam and pump tick meant something. We got hundreds of hours of work, all right, we're going, and hundreds of thousands of dollars into the Myrtle. And now it's time to make it all pay. This wasn't just about gold, it was about vindication, redemption. And then they found gold, real undeniable gold. In the box, it wasn't much at first, but it was enough to turn heads, enough to make Dave stare like he'd just seen a ghost wearing a Rolex. Myrtle was alive. Most dredges fall apart on their very first real night in action. Belts slip from their tracks, pumps clog with sediment, bearings seize under pressure, and everything grinds to a halt. But not this time, not with Myrtle. There were no leaks bursting through seams, no blowouts from overworked valves, and no frantic late-night scrambles for duct tape and last-stitch prayers. For the first time in her rocky, inconsistent history, the Myrtle Iron ran as smooth as glass. Every moving part functioned in unison. The pumps hummed, the hoses held strong, and the excavator never missed a beat. The shift pressed deep into the early morning hours, and the dredge kept working like a machine possessed. No stalls, no shutdowns, still catching gold quietly, steadily, without interruption. The crew didn't cheer, but their eyes said everything they had never seen Myrtle like this. And when the sun finally began to rise over the rough, slate-colored waters of the Bering Sea, it didn't mark the end of something, it marked the beginning of something entirely new. This wasn't just a fluke. This was proof. One cut, one night, and the trays already shimmered with gold dust and promise. But here's the hard truth. Finding gold doesn't mean finding peace. Not out here, and certainly not for Shawn because while the Myrtle ran hot and flawlessly offshore, the problems waiting back on land were colder, heavier, and far more relentless. Nearly $1 million remained unpaid. On top of that, a looming bite out Deal for the family business hung over his head like a storm cloud ready to pour down at any moment. The tomcod wasn't just land, it was pressure, compacted into 1,000 acres of obligation. What began as a simple handshake had evolved into a binding contract, but Christine Rose, his longtime workhorse, couldn't dig deep enough. Its arm maxed out just shy of where the real gold likely waited. That left Shawn with only one option: the Myrtle Iron, rebuilt, reimagined, and now proving herself on the water. He couldn't afford to wait a week or even a day. He needed Myrtle to perform, not eventually, immediately. Shawn's season is a three-pronged assault. First, offshore run. Christine Rose nonstop, sun up to sundown to midnight. It's proven reliable and has paid its dues, but it can't reach the deepest pay layers. Second, on land, the inland mine, steady if unremarkable. It doesn't turn heads, but it keeps the lights on, and Shawn wants it all, no more shared control. Buying it out means buying freedom. Third, the wild card, the Myrtle Iron, bigger, meaner, riskier. She's the only one that can reach the buried river, the one that might still hold untouched fortunes. It's easy to forget this rebuild wasn't funded with investors or slick bank loans. It was personal. Shawn pulled $350,000 straight from his own pocket. He took the kind of risk that makes every weld feel heavier, every bolt tighter, and failure that's not an option, because if even one part of this plan falters, if one scoop misses, one sole jams, one payment is late, everything collapses. That's not drama. That's math. Back on shore, another move. Bruised Dave Yum's dredge, still parked, still idle, sits like an unsolved equation. The Myrtle might be fixed, but there's another level. A rig with 5 times the bucket size of the Christine Rose, 5 times the dirt, 5 times the gold. If it runs right, Shawn wants it, not all of it, just enough control to turn it into a second Myrtle. Faster, deeper, bigger. He's drawn up plans, equipment lists, mod suggestions, not scribbles on a napkin, real diagrams, blueprints of possibility. And Dave, he's listening. The payment for the tomcod looms large. No delays, no excuses. There are no second chances. Miss it, and the entire claim gets flipped, sold off to the next dreamer with a shiny truck and a bold promise. The inland mine won't wait either. Neither will Dave's dredge, which remains in limbo, its potential still untapped. Every aspect of the operation depends on timing, precision, and cold execution. Everything hinges on this fragile balance of planning and payoff. And right now, every moment wasted is gold left in the mud, slipping through fingers that can't afford to come up empty. Each load from the pristine Rose gets processed like gold alchemy. Soul boxes are fine-tuned, pressure is maintained, there is no room for error. And back on land, the trucks run dirt like clockwork together. It creates a buffer, barely enough to breathe, but it's not enough. Let's talk about that rebuild. Again, the Myrtle used to lose 60% of its gold. That's not mining, that's charity. But now, new pumps, new water flow, a secondary SLLE dialed for fine particles. Even the wash plant was lowered for better visibility. What used to be guesswork is now precision. Shawn didn't rebuild a dredge, he built a weapon. Everything about a successful dredge comes down to precision: the flow rate, the angle at which the sediment descends, the speed of the water, and the length of the sole box. Each of these elements must be perfectly calibrated to work in harmony. Nothing can be left to chance. This is in Vegas, where the odds favor the house. Out here, if gold slips through the sol and flows out the back, it's gone for good. There are no second chances. But with Myrtle's newly upgraded system, that loss is no longer a risk. What once escaped is now caught, held tight in the redesigned sloughs. And the best part, the results are visible right away. This isn't just another season of Bering Sea gold. This is the most important 90 days of Shawn Pomrenke's Career he's out of second chances, out of backup plans, but gold seasons aren't won. In a night, they won one scoop at a time. And this season, it's either going to end with a record haul or with Myrtle, the tomcod, and $1 million dream sinking to the bottom of the sea, because when you gamble on the Bering Sea, you either strike or you drown, and this time, the captain's not playing it safe, he's betting everything.